Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Outgrow's Market of the Month. I'm your host, Dr. Saksham Sharda. I'm the creative director at outgrow.co. And for this month, we're going to interview Trevor Hatfield, who is the managing general partner at Inturact Capital and B2B SaaS investor. Thanks for joining us, Trevor.
Thanks for having me.
So, Trevor, we're going to start with a rapid fire round just to break the ice. You get 3 passes. In case you don't want to answer the question, you can just say pass, but try to keep your answers to one word or one sentence only, okay?
Sure.
At what age do you want to retire?
50, maybe never.
If you had to write a book tomorrow, what would you write about?
Outdoors.
How long does it take you to get ready in the mornings?
5 minutes.
What would be the title of the book about you if your worst enemy ever wrote it?
Jump.
Most favorite color?
Blue.
What movie do you enjoy quoting the most?
Happy Gilmore.
What is your ideal way to spend a birthday?
Outdoors.
What time of day are you most inspired?
Morning.
Fill in the blank. An upcoming marketing trend is blank.
Back to sales led.
The city in which the best kiss of your life happened.
Houston.
Pick one, Mark Zuckerberg or Jack Dorsey.
Ooh, pass.
How do you relax?
Meditation.
I'm glad you didn't say outdoors again, but okay. How many cups of coffee do you drink per day?
2.
A habit of yours that you hate.
Biting my nails.
The most valuable skill you've learned in life.
Patience.
And the last one is your favorite Netflix show.
I don't know if I have one.
Okay, well, so you had 2 passes, I think, and so you scored like 8 on 10. So you win a card. Just kidding, you don't win anything.
My
But
second cup of coffee.
fair. So, all right. So the longer questions which you can like answer at ease. The first one is, what are some things that people get wrong about marketing attribution, according to you?
It's not more around what they get wrong, but the fact that it's tracked wrong. So they're trying to attribute based on things that are inaccurate.
And what leads to this common mistake being made all the time?
It's difficult to do right.
Okay, we're not still in the rapid fire round, so you can elaborate more, unless
Okay.
this is all you have to say.
No. We can talk about attribution. So, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of different attribution models, right? And I think depending upon your business model is what works best for you. There's simple models on first touch, last touch, and then you have lots of different models in between who have multi-touch. But I think that's the problem is sometimes people pick a model that maybe doesn't align with their business model, or they're tracking data that is having attribution tracked incorrectly, which is probably the most common and worst mistake, which goes along the lines of tracking in general everywhere, including like product analytics. So tracking, I think in general doesn't get enough like data validation before trusting the data and making decisions on data, which is very dangerous if it's not accurate.
And what, according to you, would be some essentials needed to make data more actionable?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing with like as a starting point with making data more actionable is actually the definitions of your metrics or your data. So ultimately, every business. So I work in B2B SaaS. That's where I stick. But like this kind of goes across the board either way. Understanding the most important metrics through the customer journey of your business is very important. And those metrics at a starting point all need to be tracked, validated, and understand who's responsible for them, what strategies you're going to use to grow them. Do you have the tool stack and the expertise to grow those metrics? But that's where I would start with tracking. And generally speaking, surprisingly enough, like I would say every business I've worked with doesn't have that basic stuff down. The other side of this is um, every every business I've worked with thinks, even it doesn't even matter how mature they are. Um, Once we dig into the data, we define your metrics, we put events in place, we'll realize that many of these events weren't tracked in the first place, even the core ones, and sometimes, like surprisingly, the most core ones. Um, it seems to be missed somehow.
So how many, like approximately, what percentage of people or businesses that you've worked with that don't even have this core events tracked properly?
100%.
Okay. So is there an example of a business that had it tracked properly and had some other issues?
Well, once you have the tracking in place, then you definitely start to have other issues. So, I mean, ultimately, your next step is data validation, like we talked about. So, understanding if your backend's matching what your tracking data is telling you, so that then you can model different things and make decisions. But the bigger side of that is your business is always changing, right? And so understanding this as a framework and not a finite thing that you set up and forget is also important. So like instilling that throughout the team becomes vital for making decisions based on that data, and then modifying as needed when you need a new event. Where does it fit in? Is it important to track? How are you going to make decisions around it? What opportunities are you going to find in your data, and where that will lie? So this is like an ongoing thing that never ends. And I think a lot of people, when they think of tracking, they think, hey, we set this up, it's tracked now, we're going to forget it. And it just doesn't work that way. And so expectations around tracking how important it is and making decisions with data, I think is a big gap in this, definitely in the software space.
And so, how do you think marketing and sales teams should approach this tracking in the upcoming recession? Because I guess it's going to be a different period than the ones they're used to.
Simplify. So if I were to simplify this down, there would be one core metric for any business. Let's take like a Calendly, for example. Their promise is scheduling meetings. I would track the first time someone schedules a meeting, and I would get an understanding of how does that attribute to retention after that happens. Do they need to? What's your North Star metric around that? So generally speaking, your North Star metric, from my opinion, is going to come from your core metric of what your business promises. After they accomplish that for X amount of times within a period of time, that leads to the highest retention. That's your metric. But ultimately, it's around this core promise of your business, and that's what all your marketing team should be striving for. Your CX team, your sales team. Ultimately, the point is, if everyone concentrates on a single core metric that surrounds the promise of your business, it can be extracted down to that single success metric, and that's where I would start. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be complicated.
But you also mentioned earlier that marketing, the next biggest marketing trend is sales led marketing. And so, what would you have to say about that in relation to this?
Yeah, maybe I would change that to hybrid. When you're on the gun there, it's a little bit like so what I'm thinking, what I kind of meant by that in a single word was this product led movement has been very attractive for a lot of companies, which is also something that we've been very successful with and good at. But I think layering back onto this a sales led approach to central around the customer. All of this is, to me, the overarching layer is customer led, but these are all different ratios of focus, right? Whether your product is doing the selling or your salesperson's doing the selling. But I see a slow trend back towards more focus on bringing the sales guys back in and a hybrid approach layered on top of your product led approach that's becoming more and more effective. Is the long winded way around what I meant.
So, leaving sales and marketing aside, what do you think is the best strategy to scale and optimize support in a growing SaaS company?
Uh, a couple of things. Um, One is making sure that your support team can handle the majority of their requests without engineering help or like by themselves, right? So empowering your support team to be able to support the customer base without needing any outside assistance. The other is in like handoff in between alignment between operational teams. So whether that's sales to depending upon high touch, low touch models, etc. But like from a big picture, sales can hand off to support, or support can hand off to another operational arm that's a technical arm for the company, etc. But like having all of those teams understand the flow of information through the customer journey and where their roles are and who to hand off to what and when is a big gap that I see too.
And what role do you think marketing can possibly play in support?
Um, the biggest thing is just understanding the handoff. In my opinion, it's never really like a full handoff, but there should be a core strategy, a core understanding of uh, this customer journey that we talked about earlier, and the metrics that exist between them. And if the entire team is aligned around that, things become much clearer versus working in operational silos. So that's where, if you go back to tracking, it's not just about understanding attribution or, SaaS metrics, but it's also about team alignment.
And could you give us an example of some company that you've worked with that has really managed to grow their support in an ideal way?
Um, that's a good question. Yeah, I don't know if I can label companies. We've worked with many different companies, and support exists in kind of different ways depending upon, let's say, that customer acquisition strategy, right? Where some is proactive, where some is more reactive, and ideally you have both. But I would say one company we worked with was able to really optimize their support just with like first time response. Sometimes if you're not just concentrate, like that's a great metric for a support team, honestly, to concentrate on because everything else trickles down after that. So once you see first time response being under a minute or two, then there's a lot of less customers reaching out that are already frustrated just because they had to wait for a longer period of time to hear back, right? So if you just concentrate and boil down to that one metric, we saw success with that with somebody.
And so, have you seen companies that have pivoted based on the customer centric data that you're talking about, or based on what support felt that customers were in need of, for instance?
Of course, I mean, that's just customer driven data to improve upon and optimize, right? Um, uh, there's like a million possible examples of that. But I think ultimately that a lot of the support drives like sales and marketing strategy, right? Um, and product. I mean, everything comes from, if we go back to what I said earlier, like the layer on top of all of this is customer led, and that's direct customer led information that's going to influence what you do to build your business. You got to listen to the customer.
So, where do you think, or how do you think these understandings would be influenced in the upcoming recession or in the downturn? Or do you think companies would have to become more flexible? They'll have to pivot faster. They'd have to be listening to this data even more intently, or what is going to happen in the coming years?
Yeah, so when we talk about the recession side of things, we have always focused solely on what we call healthy growth. So I think people are going to have to optimize towards healthy growth. Healthy growth is predictable, scalable, repeatable, measurable. These are all different things that um, become important. And when you're not what we're calling healthy, you're generally throwing things at the wall to see what sticks or have a bit of shiny object syndrome, which is what happens when you have an influx of like money, when you get funded or different things. You start really exploring, which isn't bad, but what you'll have to do is understand how to optimize things again. And that goes back to, if you're going to be healthy, that's a part of the game in itself. I don't know if that helps answer the question.
And so, irrespective of the pandemic, then, the recession and the pandemic,
Yeah,
what do you
sure.
think the future, where do you think the future of SaaS was headed anyway?
More optimally. Yeah. So like, you can see the praise in the Bootstrap community becoming a little bit higher. The whole idea on funding and stuff is great, but like we've seen so many inflated numbers on valuations and different things. People kind of just pass right over them now, and everyone's coming back to respecting the people, respecting the grind, the people that are in the grind, that figuring out problem solving with less. Um, because ultimately, you the more that you solve problems in, let's say, a bootstrapped model, the more you actually will be successful even in a funded model. So I think that whole thing will push that further. The whole recession scenario will push that further, because that's basically what you're going to have to go back to be successful.
And so, in your work, are you seeing more and more bootstrap companies coming to the fore, or what is the split of bootstrap versus funded companies at present?
Uh, so we heavily concentrate on a framework that works for both, but our model uh, is basically leveraging your dollars optimally. So like it doesn't matter if you're funded or you're bootstrapped. We use the same sort of frameworks that maybe you would when you were bootstrapped, except considering you're going to have more, you're going to be using those dollars more optimally. Um, so when it comes to like percentages, it's I don't think it really matters. I think it's more about like, if you're going to get funding, where that money's going, and you're going to get uh, the, let's say, leverage on equity for that founder is going to be higher when that round closes.
Okay, so the last question for you is a personal one, which is, what would you be doing if not this in your life right now?
Something outdoors.
I somehow felt that was going to be the answer.
uh, I don't know. I've been moving to Colorado, and I've been spending a lot of time outdoors. And I have two little kids, a son that's 2 and a daughter that's 10 months right now. And we've been doing a lot of bike riding, and he just will sit in a river and just chunk rocks at nothing all day. And so I've been finding enjoyment in that, and just kind of like experiencing being outside a bit more, which has been nice. So and I've always kind of had that part of me inside, and naturally being in front of the computer so much, that it's a good balance.
For sure, after having been in the technology race, to find oneself throwing rocks at a river sounds very nirvana, almost like nirvanical. So I'm glad that's where you're at in your life. Well, thanks everyone for joining us for this month's episode of Outgrow's Market of the Month. That was Trevor Hatfield. Thanks for joining us, Trevor.
Yep. Thanks again.
Check out their website for more details, and we'll see you once again next month with another Marketer of the Month.